x is if x is greater than y, x is greater than y is the Boolean statement. If x is greater than y, then you can return x as the max number. Um but if x is not greater than y, then return y. So when we run this function, we get 5. When we print when we call this function, the max of 2 is and the parameters, the data we want to input are 2 comma 5. We can then print this, and when we run it, we get 5 as our max. So basically what this function did is it said that 5 is greater than 2, so x cannot be greater than y, so we can return y. But suppose we change this um, parameter here to, let's just say, 6. Then now when we run this function, 6 is greater than 5, so it's going to return 6 as our output. And now we're going to be using the function used here in order to call this function right here. So our function is def max of 3. The parameters are x, y, and z. So basically, when we write this return statement here, we're returning the maximum of the two numbers in this function. We're just basically calling this function with this return statement. And when we call now this function, it's going to be basically saying we want to find the max of 3 different numbers. So the parameters, the data we want to pass in are 3, 6, -5. So when we run this function, we get a 6 as our final output because 6 is greater than 3 and -5. So yeah, that was the homework. And yeah, we can get on with the lesson.
Okay, I'm just gonna quickly share my screen. Let me know when you can see my screen. Okay, so for today's lesson, we're gonna be talking about objects and lists. So this is a little bit more advanced Python, so don't expect to like be a master on it at your first lesson. So let's get into it. So can everyone give an example of some everyday objects? Doesn't have to be like Python related or anything, just objects that you guys use every day. You guys can unmute your microphones or put it in the chat. Okay, yeah, all of these are good answers. Pencils, cars, computers, spoons, phones. Yeah, that's good. You can even look at the background of this image, circles. Circles are objects too. So something that every object has are attributes, so they have characteristics, right? So every circle has a radius, they can either be empty or full, and they have different colors. And every object also has methods. They can move, they can change colors. It doesn't have to be just moving or changing colors, it can really be anything. Okay. So now let's get into like what the Python definition of an object is. So in Python, an object is a class definition that describes a single entity. So that might sound a little bit complicated, but it's essentially just the same thing as we looked at here. Each object has different attributes and different methods, except in Python, we call them data fields and functions. So the functions are pretty much the same thing that you guys have learned last week. And just a fun fact, Python is actually an object-oriented programming language. Okay, so now let's get into how to initialize an object in Python. So the first thing that you do is you have to create something called a class. A class basically just describes what the object is. So in this case, we're gonna be creating an object called vehicle. So we're gonna create a class for that. And what a class is, it's basically just an outline of the object. So over here, you'll also see name, kind, color, and value. Just look at the left side for now. Don't think about the right side. So name, kind, color, value, all of these things are characteristics of the object. So once again, the object is the vehicle and the characteristics are name, kind, color, and value. Oh, sorry. So now we're gonna go into defining them. So what's on the right side here is what we call default variables. So we're basically just assigning them to placeholder values. So when we actually get into creating an object, you're gonna see that you're gonna have to define the name, kind, color, and value. But then if the user doesn't input any values, it's just gonna default to the name becomes an empty string, kind becomes car, color becomes empty string, and value becomes 100. So those are just default variables. Okay, so now we're gonna see how we can actually integrate what you learned last week into these class definitions. So just creating the object is great, but what if you want to actually access the information? You have to use something called a function. And what a function is, it's basically just something that performs a certain action. So in this case, we're just going to create a function that returns different characteristics of the class or the object. And what you probably noticed was kind of different from what you guys did last week with definitions, function definitions, is the fact that you actually have to input this self keyword. You have to use a self keyword whenever you are calling upon an attribute of a class in the class definition or function. So you always have to use the self keyword. You don't have to use exactly the self keyword, but you can kind of use any word, but it's always recommended to use a self keyword, so it's standard. Okay, so I know I just threw a lot of information at you, so if you guys have questions, you guys can ask them now. You can unmute your microphone or you can just put them into the chat. Okay, if there's no questions, then I'm gonna actually walk through an example with you guys in Replit. Okay, so let's build a vehicle class together. So the first thing you're going to do is do something like this, class vehicle, which describes the object. So the object is a vehicle. So you have to create a class or an outline for it. And then you're going to have different characteristics like we looked in the previous example. So you're going to have name, and for this example, I'm just going to set everything equal to an empty string. You're going to have something called name. You're going to have the kind, which is like car, truck, whatever. And then you're going to have a color. And then lastly, you're gonna have value. So value, I'm gonna set equal to 0 because that's a number. So I can't actually set it equal to a string. So I'm just gonna keep it as a number for now, 0, just as a default. And now we can actually go ahead and create the function. So you create the function using the def keyword. And remember how I talked about how you need to put self, because every time you create a function, you always have to use the keyword self in the parentheses. So let's call it describe. Okay, so in this function, we're just going to do a simple print statement. Print the self.name. Whenever you refer to any of these data fields, you have to use the keyword self dot whatever data field you're referring to. Or else Python's not going to know what. If you just put name, it's going to give you an error. So yeah, see, it gives you an error. So you always have to put self.name. Self.name is a self.kind, like what type of vehicle it is. So this is just a simple print statement that is self.color, whatever color it is, and then and it is worth. And you have to be careful with the value, because remember, value is an integer, it's not a string. So when you're trying to create this print statement, you have to make sure you convert value into a string before you do that. So there's different ways that you can do this. The easiest way is just do something like this, string of value, like we talked about in the earlier lessons. Self.value. Or you could just create another variable called like value string, and then make it equal to the string of self.value. You could do either, but what I just showed you is probably going to be the easiest. Okay, so, okay, and then dollars. Okay, let's see if that makes sense. The name is a what kind, that is what color, and is worth value. Okay, so that makes sense. So, okay, so that's basically, we're just creating like the outline of the object. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, if you have any questions, just feel free to speak up anytime because I can't see the chat right now. Okay, so now you guys can try to practice building a function because in order to be experts at building objects, you guys need to be experts at building functions first. So let's practice building a function. I'm just going to put it in as a comment here. So create a function in this class, sorry, vehicle class, called discount, where it prints the value of the car when there is a $10 off coupon. So I'm just going to start it off for you guys so you guys have some sort of grid to work off of. You guys can do something like def discount and then remember the self keyword and then just put whatever the function is. So I'll give you guys like, I think like 3 to 5 minutes to do this, and when you're done, just type it into the chat box.
Can you go back to the directions?
Yeah, I just put it in as a comment here, but I can show you the bigger, just bold it. There. Yeah. Okay, I can go back to the Replit tab. Okay, has anyone tried it? Has everyone tried it? Or do you guys need like a few more minutes? Okay, I'll give you guys like 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll get back. Okay, I'm gonna go over the answer now. Okay, so I saw some Abhinaya, he put in an answer that's that is correct essentially, but let's try to be a little bit more creative and do something like a print statement, like that's more like kind of similar to what we did up here. So print, so I'm gonna actually do this step by step. So discount price, right? That's how much it costs after the $10 coupon is applied. So self dot value minus 10. So that's how much it's gonna cost after you, oh, okay. Why is this giving me an error? Wait, give me 1 second. Oh, okay, yeah, that'll go away. Okay, so now we can just do a print statement saying the discounted price after the $10 off coupon is applied is plus, remember we have to convert it into a string of discount price. So that should work. But yeah, you guys basically got the idea of it. So, okay, now let's go back here and continue. Okay, so hopefully everyone understood that or understands it now, because that's really important for being able to build an object. You guys really need to understand how functions work. Okay, so now that we created kind of like the outline of the object, how are we actually going to use it? Well, we have to initialize objects or instantiate them, right? So how we do this is basically create another variable, and in this case, we'll just call it car1 equals an instance of that class. So we called the class vehicle, right? So you basically just do whatever the class name is, open close parentheses. And then over here, we can, remember how I was talking about earlier, how you can basically change the name, color, kind, and value. So over here, you can basically just do that by adding the name of the variable that you created dot whatever the data field is. So we have 4 data fields, right? Name, color, kind, and value. And suppose you don't enter a name or a color or a kind, it'll just default to whatever you created in the original class definition. And of course, like one of the most interesting parts is calling the method, right? Like over here, this is just fine. We created different data fields for this object, but now we want to actually get information, right? So now we're going to call the method or the function. And how we do that is very simple. Actually, we just take whatever the variable is that we set equal to the class, and we just do dot whatever the function is. And then it'll print out whatever you try to print in the function itself. Okay, so now let's actually try to practice creating an instance of the class. Okay, so we'll just do like, I don't know, like car equals vehicle, right? And car dot name, just any name, we can just call it car1 or something. And then we can do car1 dot kind, and we can say Toyota. And then car dot color equals black. And let's just try this, and let's not set anything equal to value just to see what it would do, right? So if we don't set anything equal to value and I do something like print car dot value, it'll just print 0. Yeah, because you didn't set it equal to anything. And similarly, if I just take this and comment it out or something, and I try to run it and I try to print car1 dot name, it'll just do an empty string or just nothing. Yeah. But then let's try doing it now since I set it equal to something. Yeah, it'll print out car1. So hopefully you guys can kind of see how this all works now. And I'm just gonna go ahead and call the function on it too. So remember how we call functions, right? We just do the name of the variable dot whatever the function is, open close parenthesis. Car dot describe. Okay. Yeah, I spelled it wrong. Okay. Okay, so you see car 1 is a Toyota that is black and is worth $0. Okay, now let's actually try to, let me just set it equal to something like 100 or something. Now let's see. Yeah. So do you guys kind of see how this works? I can also try calling the discount function. The discounted price after the $10 coupon is applied is 90. Okay. So hopefully this makes sense how we can call functions on the object and instantiate objects. So now you guys can see if you can try it for yourself. So how can you create a pink truck named Daisy with the value of $300? I can put it in as a comment in Replit so you guys can refer to this when you're coding. And I'll give you guys like 5 minutes for this.
Someone asked if you can make attributes private or public.
Yeah, you can, but we're not going to get into that right now because that's a little bit more advanced. Oh, and I'm looking at the chat. To answer Albina's question, why do you have a print that calls a function which has... So you don't actually have to do 2 prints. You can just put a return or something like... It doesn't really matter. I just did it for the sake of an example. Is that none to print? What do you mean is that causing none to print?
Like the function from line 10, it doesn't return anything, right? So like if you print it, is that why, like when you print it on line 20, is that why it's making none show up?
It's showing none. It's printing none for you?
It's printing none on your screen.
Oh, I didn't even see that. Sorry. I'm not sure why it's printing none, but
Like if you just did car.discount without the print statement, would it still work?
I don't think it would, but we can try. It might, but I think we need to put a return. Oh, it does. Okay, yeah, it does. Yeah, that makes sense because you're just printing it in the function itself, so it's gonna print out. Yeah, I don't know why none was. Yeah, but good catch. Let's see if it works like this. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think maybe since I printed it twice, something happened, print none. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys like 2 more minutes.
Abinaya asked if there are other ways to instantiate the attribute values.
In Python, you can, there's like this function that you can use called def init. We're not going to go over that right now, but I included it on the notes sheet, so feel free to look over that in your free time. Yeah, you can do it through a different method. Yeah. Okay, I saw a lot of correct answers actually, so I'm gonna go over the answer now. Okay, so we can just say truck or something, call it truck equals vehicle, open close parenthesis. And then we can say truck dot name equals Daisy. And truck dot kind equals truck. And truck dot color equals pink, right? Because that's what it said. So pink. And truck dot value equals 300. Okay, so that's basically how we create another instance of the object that has these certain characteristics, right? And now we can try to call a function on it. Truck dot, let's see, do you guys want to do describe first? And then we can try. So truck dot describe. Okay, Daisy is a truck that is pink and is worth $300. And then we can also try discount. Okay, so does this make sense? Okay, I saw some answers in the chat. Don't like when you're instantiating an object, it's just an instance of the class. You don't have to make the whole class. You just have to do these couple lines that branch off of the class. You don't have to separately like create a whole other class by yourself again. Okay, so I'm just gonna stop here. Does anyone have any questions about that example? Yeah, you can, yeah, you actually, you can do that. You can definitely put in a discount value, and I definitely recommend trying it. I put it on the notes. Mine isn't outputting. Are you calling the discount function or the describe function properly? Aditi, this is for your question. The describe, are you printing anything in the describe function? Make sure you're actually printing something. And also, yeah, the indentation is incorrect. And also, I'm not sure if this is like, if Replit is picky about this, but there shouldn't be a space after describe and like the self. So when you have a function, you need to make sure you indent everything inside the function. And then when you're creating the object, you have to make sure you go back. Okay, so hopefully that solves that problem. And if there's no more questions, I'm gonna continue. Okay, so now let's do one full example together. I know this is a bit difficult, and like I understand that, but it just takes a lot of practice to get perfect at this. I'm gonna put it in as a comment here, and then we can just go through this full example together. Yeah, so now we're moving away from vehicles onto the person class. So let's first, let's create a class definition. So class person, right? Because that's the object that we want to create. Class person, and then colon. And then now we initialize all of our data fields. So it has a name, and then we can just put it as a blank string. Gender can also be a blank string. It has age, which is going to be a number, right? So just put it to 0. And then hair color, which is also going to be a string. Okay, so that this is basically just creating all the data fields and then initializing it to default variables or default values. In this case, if it's a string, it's just an empty string, and if it's an integer, it's just 0, and that's just the standard to use in Python. You don't have to, of course, you can always put in like any name or gender or hair color, but if you just want to have it like very simple, then I guess this is the best way to go. And then a describe function, right? So how do we create a describe? Def describe. Okay, describe. Okay, self, right? You have to put self. And you guys might be thinking like, oh, if this is the same function here, will it be overwritten by this? No, because that's not going to happen because it's in 2 different classes. So they only exist within that class. Okay, so describe, and then we're going to just do print something like self.name. And remember, we always have to put self anytime when you're calling a method and before any whenever you're calling upon any of these data fields. So self.name is a, and then string of self.age. So for example, like my name, like Shrija is a, and then my age 17, right? And then so you're old, and then we can do self.gender. And has, this is like going back to our lesson from week 1, right? Just putting a bunch of strings together. So here we go. Okay, so that function is going to print out this. And let's do another function, def, let's say like 10 years, okay? So 10 years self, remember the self keyword. Print, we can do something like print self.name will be, and then you can do this 2 ways. You can either, maybe I'll actually do this a simpler way for you guys so you can see. So age in 10, right? Age in 10 years equals self.age plus 10, okay? And then now when we concatenate it, all we have to do is just put string of age in 10, like this. And in 10 years. Okay, so now we basically we finished this part, has the name, gender, and age, and hair color. And then we finished this part, the function, and we also finished this, right? So we finished all three of these things. And now is the part where we actually use this to initialize a variable. So I'm just gonna describe myself, okay? So let's just call it Shrija equals person, and you have to use open close, and then Shrija dot name equals my name, dot gender equals whatever gender I am, and then dot age equals my age, equals like black, okay? Okay, so now I've successfully initialized a variable that branches off of this class, or an object that branches off of this class. And now I'm going to call a function. So let's see, describe. Okay, so that should print this string out, right? Yeah, Shrija is a 17-year-old female and has black. Oh, whoops. And has black. Okay, and then I should put hair there probably. Okay, let's try this again. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, much better. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And I can just quickly call the 10 years one too, so you can see how that one works. Yeah, Shrija will be 27 in 10 years. Okay, so hopefully this makes more sense to you now that we've walked through an example, like a full example together. And now I'm gonna stop and ask, does anyone have any questions? Okay, if there is no questions, then I'm gonna wrap up. That's gonna be the end of our objects part of this lesson, and now we're gonna move into something else called lists. So far up to now, we've kind of only looked at variables that store only one value, right? Like, for example, like your name, your age, blah, 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 right? We only looked at variables that store one value, but what if we want to have something that stores multiple values without taking up too much space, like a grocery list or something? Suppose you want to store a grocery list all under one variable. How are we gonna do that? Well, the hard way is to basically just say apples and then how many we want or something like that. Just write out like every single variable in like what, 100 lines or something, or how many lines, like how many items you have in your grocery list. But the easier way to do this that takes up much less space is through something called a list. Okay, so what is a list? A list is a collection which is ordered and changeable. So Python lists are kind of written like this, right? So you're just going to define list equals, you're going to use square brackets, and then you can just use list of strings, list of integers, any data type you want. You can even mix strings and integers. So I don't like, if for those of you who are familiar with Java, this is very similar to arrays, except for Java, it's more picky about how you initialize lists and then print them, but Python's much easier to deal with that. Okay. And to access items in the list, you have to refer to something called the index. So index is basically just the place of the item in the list, right? So you guys might think apple, okay, apple is 1, banana is 2, cherry is 3, but in Python, that's not the case. It starts from 0. So the first item is actually the 0th index. So apple is 0, banana is 1, and cherry is 2. So if you print this list of, you have to use square brackets of 1, you get banana, you don't get apple. And another nice thing is you can specify the range of indexes when by telling the program where to start and where to end the range. So when you're doing something like this, the first value here is the index that you're going to start on. So it's going to go something like 0, 1, 2. So you know you're starting with cherry. And then the last index listed here is the last index you're going to print out, but the one before that. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're not going to print out melon, but you're going to print out the value right before that, so kiwi. So it's going to print cherry, orange, kiwi. Does that make sense? Okay, if that makes sense, I'm going to move on. Okay, so now let's do some, now let's do some practice. So I didn't go over this in particular, but if you guys just had to take a guess, what do you think this would print out? Oh, you guys like a second to think about it. If you guys don't understand it, that's fine. I didn't really go over it. Yeah, so I see a lot of right answers in the chat. So yeah, it goes from cherry all the way to mango. So the first value is what it starts at, right? So 0, 1, 2. So it starts with cherry. We know that for sure because we defined it here. But then we didn't really define anything anywhere to stop at. So Python doesn't know where to stop. So it's going to go through the rest of the list. So it's going to go from cherry all the way to mango. Okay, so cherry, orange, kiwi, melon, mango. And try this one. You can just type it into the chat box whenever you're done. Okay, so I see a lot of different answers here, but let's just walk through this together. So the first thing we do is look at what there is first, right? So there's nothing first before the colon, so we're just gonna pretend that doesn't exist. But what do we know? We know what comes after the colon, right? And that's a 4. And remember, so let's see what is at index 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's kiwi, right? And remember what I said earlier, it prints everything up to the 4th index. It doesn't print the 4th index, but it prints everything before the 4th index. So it prints everything before the 4th index because there's nothing specified at the beginning. So you're just going to print everything. So because Python doesn't know where to start. So it prints apple, banana, cherry, and orange. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so Python lists have lots of different functions. They have like over 100 different functions, different things that you can do, but I'm just gonna go over a couple main ones, and in the notes sheet, I put in more functions that you guys can explore, but most of them are pretty straightforward. So if the first thing that we're going to go over is something called append. What append does is, suppose you have this grocery list, right? Apple, banana, and cherry, and you forgot to add oranges. You're in the grocery store and you forgot to add oranges, and now you don't know what to do. So the easiest way to do this is just do something like this list.append oranges, where it just puts it at the end of the list. So now this list will be apple, banana, cherry, and orange. And to add an item at a specified index, you have to use something called insert. So suppose you're at the grocery store and apples and oranges are right next to each other, but bananas and cherries are on the other side of the store. So instead of going from apples to, you could use the append method, but that would mean you have to go from the front of the store all the way to the back of the store to the front of the store again. Instead of doing that, you can make it easier by just inserting the orange right next to the apple, right? So the easiest way to do this is just put the index where you want the value to go, and then what value you want it to go in that index, if that makes sense. Okay. So you're just gonna say, you just want it to go in index 1, and what's in index 1 right now? Banana, right? So it's gonna take everything at that index that you specified and move it up 1 index, and it's gonna put an orange there. So it's not gonna do anything to apple, it's just gonna move everything above this index to the right. Okay, so another function, now we're going to go into the delete function. So if you want to remove a value from your list, you can just directly say this list dot remove whatever value it is you want to remove. Like if you want to remove banana or something, it's just going to return apple and cherry. And if you want to delete something at a specified index, you use a function called pop. You either put in the specific index that you want to remove, or you just say pop and it'll remove the last value from the list. So if you do like pop, it'll just give you apple and banana. Okay. And suppose you want to change values in the list. So the easiest way to do this is just say this list of whatever square brackets, whatever index you want it to change, and then set it equal to the variable that the value that you want to change it to. Okay, so some more functions. So yeah, these are like a lot of functions, but I'm just gonna go over like the main ones that you guys can probably use more often. Okay. So another thing is to see if a value is in the list. Suppose you forgot, for example, like you don't remember, did I put apple in the list or not, right? So the easiest way to find out if apple is in the list is do something called if apple in this list, right? So you want to see if this value is in this list. And that's the easiest way to do it. So it's very straightforward. It's like basically, it sounds exactly like how you think it in your head. And suppose you're done grocery shopping and you want to clear your list and delete everything so you can set it up for the next grocery run. So the easiest way to do this is just do something called whatever list you're referring to .clear, and it'll just empty out the whole list. And okay. And also, if you want to do something in a for loop, for example, and you wanted to iterate a certain number of values, the way to do this is just find out like the length of the list. It just returns how many values are in the list. And don't confuse this with index. You guys might be thinking, oh, like the length of the list 0, 1, 2, right? It stops at index 2. It kind of works a little bit different than index. So it just returns how many items are in the list. So 1, 2, 3 items, right? So it prints out 3. Okay. So now I'm going to go through like something more complicated, how you can actually iterate through a list. Iterate through a list means access each value in the list, right? And you can use a for loop for this. So you can just do for x in this list, and that basically what x does is x will start off with apple, then it'll go to banana, then it'll go to cherry. So it just iterates through every item in the list, like by using this for loop. And in Python, this for loop wouldn't be very impactful because you can just do something called print this list and it'll just print it out. Okay. And I just want to quickly throw in strings into here. So you can also iterate through a string as if it were an array of characters. You basically use very similar rules. You use square brackets and whatever index, and that'll return whatever character you want. Okay, so I just went through a whole list of different things that you can do. Now let's actually go over some practice examples. So let's create a grocery list on Replit. And you guys can follow along. Let me just here. Okay. Let's create a grocery list. And then how you set it is you just do the square brackets and then you can put in a bunch of different strings. So let's see, apples. I have a grocery list right here. Bread, cherries, and actually let's just stop with 2 more. Something. Lettuce, cookies. Okay, so let's just stop there, and that's our grocery list. Okay, and let's do a couple of different let's try to access different indexes. So grocery list of 0, for example. What do you guys think that would print out? If I said print grocery list of 0. Okay. So what do you guys think that would print out? Okay, yes, it would print out apples. Okay. And grocery list of 0 to 3. What would that print out? You can just type it into the chat. Okay. Yep, that would print out apples, bread, and cherries. So most of you guys got it correct. Okay. So now let's do something. Let's do something more complicated, like a for loop. So for item in grocery list. So like I said earlier, what that does, it'll just choose each item in the grocery list and do whatever you put into the for loop to each item at a time. So it'll go through each index. So first it'll start with apples, then bread, then cherries, and lettuce, then cookies, right? So suppose we want to see, suppose we want to only print out the values that that start with a C, okay? So that's a little bit more complicated, but we can do this, guys. Okay, so start with C. Let's create another list and not initialize it to anything. So we're just creating an empty list here, right? And I don't know if you guys remember, I just touched on it in the slides, but you have to think of a string as an array or as a list of characters, right? So at the 0th position, it's A, and then 1 is P, and then 2 is P, and then 3 is L, like kind of like that. So to get the first letter, so since the requirement is we want to only put the values that start with C into the start with C list, right? So what we have to do is we have to actually go through each of these and check what the first character of each value is. So for item in grocery list, and then if item, because that's just referring to apple, bread, cherries, right? So if item of 0, an item is a string, and you're just referring to the first character in the string. So if item of 0 equals C, and if you remember some of our other functions, the append function start with C dot append item, right? And that'll just put in all the values that start with C into this new list that we've created. So if I were to just print out start with C, that should just print out cherries and cookies. So that prints out cherries and cookies. So hopefully that makes sense. Now you can kind of see how a string is actually just an array of characters. Oh, sorry, list of characters. Okay, so now we'll actually do another example. Suppose I go back into my grocery list and I'm like, well, I don't want just apples. I want organic apples. I want organic bread. I want organic cherries, right? So what you can do is just do something like this, like for another for loop. So for item in grocery list, we can just do string equals, this is just a temporary string, item, or sorry, or organic, and then append that to the item. I'm gonna put a space in there. And then we can say, okay, so we can just do, and then we can just change the value in the grocery list. So grocery list, or actually, you actually have to do, or sorry, just scratch this example. Let's actually start from the beginning again. So you guys probably noticed that it was kind of difficult to set the value equal to something else because I wasn't really referring to any of the index values. So we have to find a way to create a for loop that refers to the index values, right? So the easiest way to do this is for I in, you do something called range of the length of the grocery list. So I'm gonna spend some time explaining what I mean by this. So remember what I said about length, right? That just looks at the number of items in the grocery list. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So that'll be 5, that's easy. So we know this is 5. So what is the range of 5? So what range of 5 does is that it goes through every value from 0 all the way up to 5, but not including 5. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the easiest way to get the index values of the items in the grocery list. So now we're going to say string equals, so now we can go ahead and do this. Organic and then we can say grocery list of I, because you're changing it to equal organic, whatever the value is, right? Okay, yeah, that was a little bit difficult, but I'm sure you guys will become pros at this soon. So let's put grocery list. Okay. Okay, so now it prints out organic in front of every value. So I know that was a little bit difficult. Does everyone understand how this works? Wouldn't it be bad to use string? It wouldn't be, but what do you mean would it be bad? No, it wouldn't override the casting. I'm not sure what do you mean by, like, what do you mean by that? String of 5? I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean by that.
I was just asking, like, if you use that as a variable name, then will it override the function for casting, or will it be fine?
It'll be fine. It won't override.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, because you can kind of see here that it didn't really override. Okay. So does anyone have any other questions? I'm looking at some of the chats. Varun, what do you mean by why does it have single quotes around it when you print it? Are you referring to this? What are you, oh, when you print it in the console. Oh, that's just the default format of Python. Like, so whenever it prints any list, it'll just print single quotes around it in hard brackets. Since grocery list, you're printing out the list. So that's just the default. And if you want to get over that, if you don't like the look of that, you can just do a for loop. So for item in grocery list, you can just do like print item, and that won't give you the quotes. Yeah, see, it just prints like regular. Okay. So I'm not seeing any other questions. Okay. So now I want you guys to try to practice. So print, create a list of students. And okay, so I'm just gonna put in the direction. So first, create a list of students and create a list of numbers. And the lengths of both of these should be the same. Okay, create a list of students and create a list of numbers, and then print the student and the number. So it would be something like, if you have a list that looks like this, like Shrija, I don't know, like Abhinaya, and like, let's see, okay, and like Varun, okay? So suppose you have something like this. That's going to be like your list of students, and then you want to create another list of numbers that correspond with these students. So 23, 12, and 5, right? So something like this. And then what you want to print out is something like Shrija, 23, Abhinaya, 12, and then Varun. So something like this onto the console. Let's see if you guys can do that. I'll give you guys like 5 minutes for that. You guys can use the same list or any other list. Just make sure that the length of both of the lists are the same. So I'm going to give you guys a quick hint. You probably want to use something like this because you're trying to go through two different arrays. I mean, two different lists. So you want to use a structure like this for that. Okay, how many more minutes do you guys need? Like 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? If you're stuck, also, could you put that into the chat box? So I know where all of you guys are at. Okay. Okay, so so some of you guys are finished. So I'm gonna go ahead and go over the solution. I'm assuming that everyone has gotten a chance to try this. Okay, if everyone's gotten a chance to do this, I'm going to go over the solution. So let's create a list for students. Students equals, I'm just gonna go with this list. Just and numbers or ID. And we can just do these values, 12 and 5. Okay, so now you do something very similar to what we did here. So for I in range of length of the of students, it doesn't matter. You can use IDs too because both of them have the same length. And then we're just going to do a simple print statement. Print students of I is number. We can just do ID of I. So that should work. Let's see. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Remember, you have to make sure you cast it to a string before you concatenate it. Okay, so let's run this. Give me like 1 second. Okay, I'm just gonna do something like string of ID equals like string of ID of, let's see. Or I'll just do, yeah, let's see.
If you go to line 10 and change your variable, it might prevent it from getting overridden.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Now I get what you mean. Okay, yeah, you were just saying because that was a value. Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, I didn't catch that, but thank you. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Okay, okay, got it. Okay, so now it prints out. So what was happening earlier is I just created this equal to string, and what string? String is already a value in Python. So it's already a value in Python. So since I was trying to set it equal to something else, it was giving me that error. So yeah, good catch there. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. I was like confused what you were saying. But yeah, hopefully that makes more sense to everyone. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, so I've only kind of covered some of the basics of lists. There's obviously so much more to lists, and I've created like a simple cheat sheet for you guys to go and practice some more functions for your own. So that concludes our lesson. Does anyone have any questions about objects or lists or anything in general? Okay, so if there's no more questions, then I think you guys are free to go. I'm gonna stop sharing.